You are standing in the grocery store aisle on a Tuesday evening, holding a basket that feels heavier than it should, and suddenly you realize you cannot remember what you came here to buy. The fluorescent light hums above you. Someone brushes past with their cart. You feel a strange tightness in your chest, not panic exactly, but something close to it. A quiet voice inside you whispers that you are failing at something you cannot name. You promised yourself you would cook this week. You promised yourself you would stop ordering takeout. You promised yourself you would be better, more consistent, more organized, and here you are again, tired and blank, staring at rows of pasta you do not want to choose between. This is not really about the grocery store. It is about the gap between the person you said you would be this morning and the person standing here now, holding a basket and feeling small. Let me sit with you for a moment in that aisle. What you are feeling is not weakness. It is the quiet ache that comes when we notice our own inconsistency. We make promises to ourselves in the morning light, promises about discipline and order and steadiness, and by evening those promises feel like stones we are carrying. The old wisdom about self-discipline and consistency was never meant to be a whip. It was meant to be a lantern. The question is not whether you failed today. The question is whether you can learn to respect yourself enough to try again tomorrow without turning that trying into punishment. There is an old teaching that says discipline is not about perfection. It is about returning. The word itself comes from a root that means to learn, not to obey. Discipline was originally the condition of being a student, someone who is still learning, still adjusting, still finding their way. Somewhere along the line we turned it into something harsh, something that sounds like a drill sergeant or a disappointed parent. But the older, quieter version of discipline is much simpler. It says this: you are allowed to begin again. You are allowed to notice you wandered and then choose the next small honest step. That is all. No drama. No shame. Just the next action. Let me tell you about someone I knew years ago, not a student this time, but a colleague, a fellow teacher who always seemed so steady. She taught literature and kept a beautiful office, the kind with plants that never died and books arranged in a way that looked effortless. I used to wonder how she managed it. One afternoon she invited me in for tea and I saw her desk up close. There was a small card taped to the edge of her computer monitor. It said, "What is the next kind thing?" I asked her about it. She smiled in a tired way and told me she had spent most of her 30s hating herself for not being disciplined enough. She would set impossible schedules, fail by noon, and spend the rest of the day in a fog of quiet shame. The card was her way out. Every time she felt that fog coming, she would look at the card and ask herself the question. Not what is the perfect thing, not what would a better person do, just what is the next kind thing. Sometimes the answer was to write one email. Sometimes it was to take a walk. Sometimes it was to stop and eat lunch like a human being. The card was still there years later because she still needed it. Discipline, she said, was not about being hard. It was about being kind enough to keep choosing. That is what the old lessons about self-respect and consistency were really pointing toward. They were not asking you to become someone else. They were asking you to respect yourself enough to stop abandoning yourself. Every time you make a promise to yourself and then break it without noticing, you are teaching yourself that your own word does not matter. Every time you set a plan and then let it dissolve into distraction, you are whispering to yourself that you are not worth the effort. That is the real erosion. Not the missed workout or the forgotten grocery list, but the quiet loss of trust between you and yourself. The old counsel says that self-respect begins the moment you decide your own promises are worth keeping, not because you will keep them all, but because you are worth the dignity of trying. So what does that look like in the grocery store aisle? It looks like this. You notice the tightness in your chest. You do not push it away or call yourself weak. You let it be there. You take one breath, not because breathing fixes everything, but because it gives you a single second to choose what comes next. Then you ask yourself a very small question. Not what should I do, not what would a disciplined person do, but what is one honest action I can take right now that moves me toward the person I want to become? Maybe the answer is to buy 3 simple ingredients and make one meal tonight. Maybe the answer is to leave the store and order takeout and forgive yourself and plan to try again tomorrow. The wisdom is not in the choice. The wisdom is in the choosing. The wisdom is in the moment you stop drifting and start steering, even if you only steer for 5 minutes before you drift again. There is an old image from the practical philosophers, the ones who believed philosophy should be lived, not just discussed. They said that building consistency is like tending a small fire. You do not need a bonfire. You do not need to burn everything down and start over. You just need to add one stick at a time. Some days the fire burns bright. Some days it barely flickers. But as long as you return to it, as long as you add one more stick, the fire does not go out. The returning is the discipline. Not the size of the fire, not the heat of the flame, just the quiet decision to come back and tend it again. Let me make this even smaller. Tonight, before you sleep, I want you to think of one promise you made to yourself recently that you did not keep. Not the biggest one, not the one that carries the most shame, just one. Maybe it was to drink more water. Maybe it was to answer a message. Maybe it was to go to bed earlier. Now I want you to ask yourself this: can I keep a smaller version of that promise tomorrow? Not the whole grand plan, just the smallest honest piece of it. If you promised to exercise every day and did not, can you promise to stretch for 5 minutes tomorrow morning? If you promised to eat better and did not, can you promise to eat one meal sitting down, without a screen, paying attention? The old teaching says that self-respect grows in the soil of small kept promises. You do not need to transform your whole life. You just need to prove to yourself, once, that your word still means something. And when you fail again, because you will, because we all do, the wisdom says to notice it without theater. Do not make it a tragedy. Do not turn it into evidence that you are broken. Just notice it the way you would notice a cloud passing. Oh, I drifted again. That is interesting. What now? The philosophers who lived through war and exile and loss knew something we forget: consistency is not about never falling. It is about shortening the time between the fall and the return. That is all. You drift, you notice, you choose again. You drift, you notice, you choose again. That rhythm, repeated over months and years, is what builds a steady life. Not perfection. Just the practice of returning. Here is the line I want you to carry with you: discipline is not the absence of drift, it is the presence of return. You do not need to stop being human. You do not need to stop being tired or distracted or overwhelmed. You just need to keep coming back to yourself, again and again, with the same quiet respect you would offer a friend who is trying their best. That respect, that returning, that is where the steadiness lives. So tonight, as you let yourself rest, I want you to release the idea that discipline means being hard. I want you to set down the belief that consistency requires you to be someone you are not. The old wisdom was never asking for that. It was asking for something much simpler and much kinder. It was asking you to notice when you wander, to forgive yourself for being human, and to choose one small next step that moves you toward the person you are becoming. That is enough. That has always been enough. Let the grocery store aisle fade. Let the fluorescent light dim. Let the promises you broke today become lessons instead of weights. You are learning. You are returning. You are building a steadier version of yourself, one small kept promise at a time. And that work, quiet and unwitnessed as it is the most dignified work there is. Rest now. Tomorrow you will try again. And that trying, that returning, is already a kind of success.